Hello everybody, my name is Yanis Yansha and I'm happy to welcome you to Tactics and Practice, the series of conferences that Aksioma organizes every year since 2010. This year we host the 8th edition of Money Lab, the international network of artists, designers, activists and geeks who experiment with forms of financial democratization. Initially, the conference was supposed to take place last March in the premises of Kinoshishka in Ljubljana, but due to the pandemic, we had to transform it into a series of regular streaming events that take place every Monday at 5 p.m. Central European Time at aksioma.org/moneylab8. Today, we are here actually to conclude this interesting and challenging experimental journey, and we will do so with a panel entitled Value Extraction and the Workforce of the Cryptocene, moderated by the writer and independent curator Oubloom, and with the participation of Martín, Nadal and César Escudero Andaluz, Paul Zeidler and Max Hampshire of the Exit Tech production studio Nascent, members of Telekommunisten group Dimitri Kleiner and Baruch Gottlieb, and the artist Sašo Sedlaček. But before we begin, please let me remind you that we have a web chat available on our website where you can share with us your ideas, comments, and questions during the debate. At the end of the panel, we'll make sure that a selection of it will be asked to our guest on your behalf. Martin, Cesar, Paul, Max, Dimitri, Baruch, Sašo, thanks for accepting our invitations. Aude, I leave you the mic.
Thank you, Yanis. Hi, everyone. I'm very happy to be with you today because even if we're all scattered around the world, we can still plot under the same sky. So for this session, upon the invitation of Aksioma, I gathered 7 artists and researchers around the idea of value extraction in relation to the workforce of the Cryptocene. The workforce of the Cryptocene, you may ask. Of course, it's us. Value extraction? Well, from us. Value is classically said to stem from human labor, and money to represent this value. And although those theories have tentatively been made obsolete by, among other things, the subjectivization of value, which opened the doors to the narratives of financialization, the idea that value should be objectively linked to the steps of its production endures in our economic imaginaries. Whether labor was the first price, the original purchase money that was paid for all things, or whether its value was indexed to the profit derived from it, the production of value with regards to labor still stands as one of the most pressing issues of the digital evolution. It's interesting to bear in mind that in the Western European region at least, work doesn't seem to have been socially valued until rather late. The glorification of work as a value really started by the end of the 17th century, until the mass propaganda put in place by the nascent modern education system of the 19th century achieved to put it at the centers of one's life. Before, and especially during antiquity, work was an activity traditionally devalued, and even at times condemned, and it was seen as opposing the spiritual meaning of life. Human beings were to find self-fulfillment with otium, that is to say meditation, reflection, poetry, politics, and even the military, but not with its negation, negotium, which is to say trade or business. After centuries of direct workers' exploitation, by all means and in all forms, the late 20th century saw otium and negotium merge in a new knowledge economy that extracted value from intellectual and cultural work. What some viewed as a path towards a sort of dot communism, unfortunately mostly led to a data is the new oil state of mind. The situation and the history that produced it are of course more complex, and it's an attempt at mapping them through the lens of the massification of interest in cryptography that Martín Nadal and César Escudero Andaluz will explore in their presentation. Not only data extraction turn each and every internet user into an unwitting worker by turning otium into negotium, but it's also heavily damaging everyone's attention capacity to the point of seriously reducing our critical thinking ability. This is the question addressed by Ishtargate, a blockchain-based microeconomy platform designed to reward the reading and commenting of critical content with tokens exchangeable in real life. The platform has been devised by the writer and visual theorist Penny Rafferty, together with Nascent, that we'll have the pleasure to hear today. One step further in this return to valuing Aude, our third speaker for today, Sašo Sedlaček, turns some data extraction technologies against themselves and allows users of its Oubloom platform to mine cryptocurrencies while standing still and to exchange the product of those physically inactive moments for the workforce of other people. And what if, in the age of ever-expanding automation, we could evaluate the machinic workforce and transmit it through a currency? Embedding the classical labor value theory in a rational digital cryptocurrency, the Hacket, designed by Telekommunisten, is intended as a criticism of Bitcoin architecture and as a way to rethink it as a stable currency, thus usable as a currency. So without further ado, the first presentation will be that of Martín, Nadal and César Escudero Andaluz, based on their work titled Economy, Knowledge, and Surveillance in the Age of the Cryptocene. Martín is an artist and developer currently studying interface cultures at the Kunstuniversität in Linz. César is an artist and a researcher at the same university, where his work focuses on human-computer interaction and interface criticism. Together, they devised the Bitcoin, also known as the worst miner ever, an old calculator machine hacked to be used as a miner to validate pending Bitcoin transactions. They also created Bitcoin of Things, a playful Bitcoin miner combining different sensors and a Wi-Fi microcontroller that can be attached to daily life objects that have to be put in motion to start hashing. Today, they'll take us through a diagram decomposed with key moments in the history of cryptography for what will work as a historical introduction to our topic. César, Martín, the mic is yours.
Today's presentation, we will present the diagram Economy, Knowledge, and Surveillance in the Age of Cryptocene. It was published in a peer-reviewed journal Aude. It's an open access research journal, edited by Christian Andersen, Jeff Cox, Soren Paul, Aarhus University, and Transmediale Festival. The diagram proposed different paths from the classic cryptography to the cryptocurrencies, and it is divided in three sections: the cognitive capitalism, crypto culture, and the third one is the blockchain. At the same time, the diagram compares crypto surveillance, intellectual property, behavioral algorithms with hacker culture, crypto-anarchism, peer-to-peer movements, cypherpunks, ending up in the consequence of mining processes, and crypto-colonialism. The diagram shows a lot of information and process an open structure in which the observer can freely establish different routes. Today, we are going to do one route focus in crypto culture and blockchain. 25 years before Bitcoin, in 1982, the cryptographer David Coombe created a blind digital signature and an anonymous e-money application called eCash. He also invented many cryptography protocols and founded GigiCash. 2 years later, Phil Zimmermann developed pretty good privacy to sign, encrypt, and decrypt text, mail, files, increasing the security of, for example, email communications. This can be considered one of the first facts to the democratization of cryptography. In 1988 appeared the Crypto-Anarchist Manifesto, written by Timothy C. Main. It redefines the structures of power within society, specifically those between individuals, privacy, and government. Also, late 80s, this vision of protecting privacy and anonymity was embodied in an activist movement called cypherpunks. The term was coined by Jude Milon. Adam Back developed Hashcash and the proof of work system used by Bitcoin. Eric Hughes wrote the Cypherpunk Manifesto, making an analogy between privacy and security to defend the rights of open society. Hughes is considered one of the founders of Cypherpunk Manifesto movement. In 1993, John Gilmore was considered a cypherpunk as well, shared cryptographic classified documents, and the NSA charged him for espionage in the 1995. In 1998, a free software library called OpenSSL was developed to protect communication over computers networks. Cypherpunks Tim Husson and Ben Laurent collaborate in this project. Nick Szabo developed the concept of smart contracts in 1998. Szabo designs a mechanism for decentralized digital currency called BitGot, and it was never implemented. In 2002, Harold Finney finished his B-Money. He said, the important point in this conception of money is that fundamentally it's basically a form of information, and B-Money clearly demonstrates that money is not about atoms, it's about bits. The first Bitcoin white paper joined all of these ideas and technologies, and it was published in 2008 by an anonymous person or collective of people called Satoshi Nakamoto. Aude and Adam Back were the first two people contacted by Satoshi Nakamoto in 2008. Harold Finney received the first Bitcoin transaction from Satoshi Nakamoto, and in 2010, Bitcoin's first real-world transaction took place when Lazo Hanjet in Florida sent 10,000 Bitcoin to a volunteer in UK who ordered 2 pizzas with a cost of 25 euros.
Now we are going to talk about the trustless societies and how all the, in this blockchain sphere and world and environment, the concept of trust has been shifted from the human to the machine, no? So, yeah, we're going to start with the first time that a machine started like managing wallets of Bitcoin. That is like the first example we found. That is like when a user called Jats in a Bitcoin forum in 2010 proposed a software that was capable of managing a Bitcoin wallet that is capable of paying the services of a server, so the software, it would keep running. So it would form like that loop that in some way it was like buying and selling resources, so it could in some way survive. That idea keep on when Vitalik Buterin started like the project Ethereum. That Vitalik was also very in the sphere of Bitcoin and was following like in that world, and published like a magazine. And he founded like he founded Ethereum, that is like a system that also it's capable, at the difference of Bitcoin, is capable of running code, but instead of running in a server controlled by a human, even though in a software, it's run completely in the blockchain, which gives like a complete independence from humans. Once that the software is there, once that it will be keep running as long as it has resources. The concept of a smart contract, that is like this sort of software, it was like coined by Sašo, that also César mentioned it before, one of the initial cypherpunks. And this is, I don't know what this, yeah, this is like the logo of Ethereum, that we will mention it a little bit later. And this is like the first big smart contract that happened. This is the logo of a smart contract called DAO. DAO, it's like the first big smart contract. It behaved like some sort of hedge fund. It was like people could run like a crowdfunding, but it was able to come with 150 million euros, and then with that money, it was like running the people could vote what was like in where should invest that money. The problem is that there was like some sort of a problem in the code, and some hackers were capable of getting all that money. So Ethereum at that point was like in a big problem, because most of the capital running in Ethereum platform was in hands of some hackers. So what they decided was like forking the Ethereum, and after that they decided to roll back. So it's like undo all this hack, so the people could recover their money and disappear like in a forking. We can see in the lower part like the Ethereum that we know nowadays, that is a blockchain that at certain point went back, like going against their own ideology. And then in the green logo is something that is called Ethereum Classic, that is like a fork that they kept with the mantra code is law. No? For us, it's very important because in this fork, even though that Ethereum is more coherent with the ideas of crypto-anarchism and the ideas of a smart contract, is a platform or a blockchain that is much less successful and the value is much lower. And that is because all the miners and all the capital went with Ethereum, that it was supported by Vitalik Buterin and the foundation, and left the other Ethereum alone. Basically, the main difference between these two blockchains is that one was supported by the miners and the other one was not supported by them. Yeah, and this is like they have like different. One is called ATC, that is the classic, and the other one is 88, that is like the one that we know nowadays. For us, this is very important because it shows how important is mining. And César and I, we've been working a lot in this concept of critical mining, and this is one of the examples of it's not so important like the ideas, it's like what it really gives value in this world of blockchain is the resources that are willing to be invested. And this is like a conclusion.
In this rule of artists in blockchains is at a certain point we think that the root of the art is to using these platforms and that there are some artwork using this platform. At this point, we ask ourselves, how can artists explore the potential of dangers of Bitcoin technologies? We are basically in our practice, we are not interested in artwork that only use blockchain technologies for adding layers of speculation, no, to the mercantilization of art market. We seek for an artwork production, no, where the reflection of the critical, the production of reflection and a critical artworks that are opening a critical debate, artworks capable of raising questions by using different paradox on an interpretation of the mining processes. No, in general, projects capable of informing users, no, how natural resources can be transformed in value. That's all.
And that's all. Yeah.
Thanks. Waiting for your questions.
Thank you, César and Martin. Our second speakers today are Max Hemscher and Paul Seidler, who together form Nascent, that they qualify as an exit tech production studio investigating alternative infrastructures. Delving into the nature of games, economics, and consensus systems, Nascent creates computational experiments and tools to prototype technological secessionism, a concept they will clarify in their presentation. There were also 2/3 of TerraZero, a project you may have heard of, which prototyped a self-sovereign natural entity in the form of an augmented forest, able to engage in financial contracts through a DAO. Delving in the tokenization of natural resources, TerraZero also created flower tokens in 2018, I guess, 100 of dahlias you could buy, trade, and speculate on, while they were monitored 24/7 by cameras and maintained via a semi-automated watering system. But today, as Nascent, they will discuss art and exit, their experiments with alternative economies. Max, Paul, the floor is yours.
Hi, I'm Max Hampshire. I'm one part of Nascent. I'm an artist and researcher, and I'm going to be presenting, along with Paul, some of our projects today, centered around art and exit.
Hi, my name is Paul Seidler. I'm also like an artist and researcher. I'm one part of Nascent, and yeah, we will present to you today some projects we're doing.
So before we get into the projects, as per the kind of title of our talk, I want to kind of very briefly outline this idea of exit and what we mean by this. So it was perhaps popularized in Albert Hirschman's treatise, Exit, Voice and Loyalty, where he was actually doing an analysis meant for economists, looking at the different choices that consumers could face. If a company or a good was deteriorating, they could either voice dissatisfaction or they could exit, so they could stop interacting with the organization. And this is a concept that has now kind of been applied as a behavioral model or a way of understanding how individuals act or interact with organizations kind of across the board.
And we are pretty much interested in these kind of like models of looking outside of institutions and like building other and kind of like new forms of engagement with kind of institutions.
So the first of these projects is a project called Gate, which was a collaboration with Penny Rafferty, and it was developed for the Statista project that was happening in Berlin last year. And basically, it was a platform for a more free-form critique, both from Penny as her role as the in-house critic of Statista itself, as well as the public who were going to be kind of interacting both with Penny's critique and the projects that were running over the year of the Statista project. And it was kind of an attempt to flip, maybe kind of flip the idea of the attention economy in favor of those who are actually going to be engaging with the platform and the projects. So an attempt to kind of create a little microeconomy that allowed for passivity to be rewarded, as opposed to the more kind of constant activity interaction-based platforms.
The users via this interface you're seeing here were able to own these tokens, Ishtar tokens. by interacting with this web interface. So this means kind of what you see here, like scrolling, but also like reading and commenting on things. All of these actions are always like rewarded with kind of tokens. User were then able to mint and to cash out. And this cash out basically, or maybe first like the technical details to this. So there was a Ethereum wallet which was created and stored in a browser cookie, and all of the Ether basically was stored in a browser cookie and could be used by the user to cash out and basically get services or get certain things from the institution, in this case the cafe. For example, they could rent a room at cafe, they could get like invited to a dinner or other kind of like goodies and services.
And Ishtar was basically the first of what we're kind of calling our minimal viable form project. So we were trying really here to, as much as possible, remove the kind of cognitive overhead that's usually associated with people getting to kind of interact with novel kind of crypto-economic projects or crypto-economic experiments by basically allowing for the crypto bit of it to become really passive and just kind of enable this little microeconomy instead of it actually being at the forefront in terms of cognitive effort with onboarding and all of this kind of stuff, but also conceptually. So we didn't want it to be a project about a token. We just wanted to have this token enable this project. So as Paul kind of outlined beforehand, crypto was really helpful in this instance in that you could do stuff like generate wallets and have these wallets kind of stored in cookies. And it also removed, all of this could then happen in browser. So you didn't then have to have some kind of a server infrastructure that was then logging kind of people's activity or any of this. All of this happened just in the browser and didn't travel anywhere else.
Yeah, the interface is kind of like a little bit user-unfriendly design. So in contrast to what you would normally expect in this kind of like content creation, which would be like something like an infinite scroll interface. And it's based on the idea that of nonlinear systems and information as kind of like nonlinear system in which basically various nodes of critique form this kind of like bigger structures surrounding like commentary and reference to other nodes. So I think we would go on now and present a different project or another project which we also did, which is called Sprawl Systems. Let me switch to it. Yes.
Yeah, there we go. So Sprawl was developed for the MFRU Festival in Maribor last year, and it is basically the start of a research project which is trying to visualize how and kind of broadly visualize how and when computation happens within systems, or how certain kind of non-dynamic systems can begin to be understood outside of this narrative of kind of spontaneous decentralization or spontaneous self-organization that is quite pervasive in a lot of these discussions. And conceptually, we were coming from this idea of Manuel de Landa and his discussion of markets, which he then defined as meshworks, and anti-markets, which actually stems from a distinction made by Gödel. And basically, de Landa outlined this kind of like a topology of markets as a series of fluctuating tension points between these emergent local mesh markets and these kind of very reified networks of super planned distribution, which emerge after you get kind of a certain threshold of goods liquidity, and that threshold is then passed. And these are anti-markets, which you could understand as basically these kind of large, rigid corporate forms that are currently monopolizing kind of both goods markets and increasingly like network infrastructure today.
So in kind of de Landa's derivation of the world economy, there's a certain point in which like the local market becomes like outrun by like organizational trade, basically running as early forms of like corporate entities. And this leads also to a certain like separation between, you could say, like markets as good things, so markets as like local mesh networks in which like transparent trade is facilitated and the price is known to all actors, and bad markets in which are basically like monopolistic, like anti-markets in which like just like one or two actors are like separating the whole like market. And this kind of theory or this kind of like conceptualization is still like really apparent today in certain like peer-to-peer like theory. And from this also certain questions can be posed. So if there is a artificial teleology towards certain states in the markets and how this is can be constructed or how this is constructed.
And so I suppose we were trying to visualize some of this by reworking a very kind of like well-known piece of computational modeling, which is John Horton Conway's Game of Life. And so Conway's Game of Life is basically a zero-player game, which is determined by its initial state. So it's a completely deterministic cellular automaton. It doesn't require any human interaction, and it could be said to serve as a kind of universal Turing machine, which actually determines its own proof-oriented state. And basically the emergent behavior of a particular game of life can't be predetermined without actually simulating the exact starting conditions of the game itself. But although we kind of utilize this game of lifestyle interface with Sprawl, we to a certain extent kind of undermine this and included a series of random interjections into these conditions, which, as you can see from the website, are kind of seen as these kind of explosions of activity or explosions of capital, and the debris of these are kind of obfuscating maybe some of the other aspects that are going on.
We use this also heavily to discuss this whole project as kind of like a proxy critique of the use of the metaphor of decentralization, which at a certain point becomes like a synonym with certain conceptualization of spontaneous order relating to like certain Austrian schools of economics and this kind of things. And instead kind of we kind of like want to more talk about like ways in which economy or certain like microsystems are actually computable today. And even if they bear a certain complexity, they kind of can be in a certain way planned in a way. Yeah. And in this sense, the whole project poses a similar argument to large-scale infrastructure planning than, for example, the book or the work People's Republic of Walmart, and that is that price calculation might be done already on nationwide scale in like certain corporations.
Okay. And so following this, we would like to talk about the last project that we're going to talk about, which is a work in progress currently and is kind of going under the working title of temporal successionisms. And it's basically rooted in this idea that if we conceptualize time not as a kind of as a notion of motion, so kind of like time's arrow, or an activity, but actually a subject inherent condition, and this kind of incredibly abstract thing, we can see that there is like a socioeconomic practice of timekeeping as the main root of timekeeping practices. So otherwise put, time emerges from timekeeping practices, which itself emerges from the people that are actually engaging with this thing. So we could actually kind of free the idea of time from previous reference points, such as kind of like thermodynamics, and maybe think about it as more of a kind of socio-technical construct.
And this is something which inherently relates obviously to blockchain and to kind of like ways of consensus systems. And if the process of creating time systems and the mechanisms by which we count them is always bound to social or techno-economical processes, many questions could arise from this. So how do different time systems rely on metrics outside of the dominant ones? how is infrastructurally increasingly acknowledged as actors, and how are our ways of producing goods and services reliant on conceptualization of time that is rooted in these kind of technological strata.
So
in
basically,
the end,
the idea. Sorry, Paul. Keep going.
No, go on.
So the way that this is going to be presented and visualized is that we are planning to create kind of a series of modified clocks, so based on a selection of the kind of infrastructural or technosocial processes that we were just outlining as actually being one of the kind of emergent causes of different timekeeping practices. And these will basically then be installed in various spaces in order to create what we're terming as a kind of a series of temporal successions, by trying to expose this relation between the different spaces and the different kind of processes that work with them in order to either generate or just the different processes that are kind of maintaining time in these spaces. So an attempt to kind of create a patchwork time and provoking people who are visiting these spaces this realization of novel temporalities or perceptions of kind of erratic time as rooted in these processes themselves.
One adding point maybe to this is that a lot of these things we're talking now about, basically practices of timekeeping in network systems, is inherently obviously linked to kind of distributed ledger systems in which this happened, but these are not the only systems where this kind of practice of collective timekeeping, as different from kind of normal time, is happening. So there are things like raft algorithms or Paxos algorithms, which used in huge data centers at for example, Google or other large-scale IT infrastructure, which kind of have all their own kind of ways of keeping time in this large-scale infrastructure systems. And I think this is worth exploring and worth looking into.
Thank you, Max. Paul, I don't know if you can hear me. Yes, I guess. So just a parenthesis, right now, as we have this amazing feature that is called a chat, where you can ask you people watching us any questions you may have. So don't hesitate to connect. You'll find it on aksioma.org/monelab8, on talk.io/monelab8. And here I close the parenthesis. So, can doing nothing be the ultimate form of work in the age of automation? Since almost every aspect of our lives is now monetizable, is our free time also valuable? These are some of the questions which Sašo Sedlaček will address in his presentation. Sašo is an artist and a professor at the Academy of Fine Arts and Design in Ljubljana, and one of the projects that shed light on his work was his 2006 Beggar Robot, an open-source device made of recycled computer hardware that could access areas normally off-limits to beggars, such as shopping malls, where the richer members of society are to be found. I'll let him tell you about his latest project, still partly in the making. Sašo, the mic is yours.
Okay, hello everyone. I will start my presentation of the Oubloom project with some pictures made in the last few months all around the world, and with the questions. What do these images have in common? Like here we can see some really blue sky over Delhi, and on the opposite side, the usual smoggy image of it. Here we can see the same situation in Beijing. Here we have crystal clear waters in Venice with even some dolphins swimming in it. Here we can see wild goats taking over Welsh Town in the UK, or monkey gangs waging war in some Thailand city. Or also have deers chilling out on some Japanese streets. And the answer to the question, apart from the obvious one, of course, is human inactivity. We have witnessed a horrible event, but this event had some unpredictable positive consequences, like for environment, for example. But also right after the lockdown, some really interesting ideas started to circulate, like about alternative societies. Now suddenly there were some really serious talks about implementation of universal basic income. How we need a really resilient, free and public healthcare system, shorter working hours, and so on and so on. But in the end, it's if we can call it an end, it feels like that with these ideas, the mountain was shaking and the mouse was born. We rushed back to our normality as soon as it was possible. Like it seems that we are more terrified of the collapse of global capitalism than the coronavirus. And unfortunately, there are still no ideas and possibilities being implemented on the horizon right now. And also too many recent revolts against the right populism. It's just basically maintaining the status quo. It seems like there was obviously not enough time for us to fully daydream the possible structures of new societies. I don't know if you noticed, but just before the corona crisis, there were also some serious ideas circling around about possible shortage of working hours. Like Japanese Microsoft tested out 4 days working week with a result of efficiency for 40%. Also, Finland said that they will introduce 6 hours and 4 days a week for all sectors of the government. I don't know what's going on with these ideas at the moment. So for a moment, it seemed like the predictions of John Maynard Keynes are becoming a reality. Now he predicted a cut in working hours by half for the 21st century. Or if not erasure of all time, like some other thinkers predicted, like Bertrand Russell. It is a fact that today a lot of the work can be done by AI, machines and robots, but and there are also some predictions that in 2 decades it will be cheaper to manufacture a robot than to hire a worker in Africa. So it's with this in mind, it's not that difficult to imagine or to visualize a future of workless society where we are doing just the necessary well-paid work that AI and robots cannot do, or maybe just work that we choose to do. But of course, the question remains: how do we then distribute wealth? And in that case, how do we maintain local and global exchange of goods and services to some extent? How do we buy stuff from AI and the robots? And I think that it's not going to work completely without some sort of market economy, and we have to dig into it. Because we humans have invented a convention, a medium that is in the core of all of our civilizations, that enables us to exchange goods and services, and that's money. And in the last decade, we have witnessed an unprecedented experimentation in the field of monetary systems. Like that, everything started with Bitcoin, and but all this experimentation is showing us that the existing monetary system is not the only one possible. That it can be democratized, it can be decentralized, distributed, mostly using the blockchain technologies. So money, in a way, is an invention. It's a fiction, like a religion is a fiction, or also a law or ideology. There are fictions and the consensus that we agree on. But can this also be used to turn such thing as a laziness, non-work into a productive activity with purchasing power? Can it become a value of human inactivity? Here you can scan a QR code and check for yourself. I will switch to the live website in a minute. The Oubloom website platform is basically a web application, and works in a browser, so anyone can use it on their phone, a tablet, or computer basically any device with internet connection and a webcam. The project actually dates back to around 3 months BC, that is before Corona. It started in November 2019 in Aksioma project space with mining performance on for coin when 3 miners meditating in front of an AI rig and a live audience created the first block of Oubloom coins by recording their meditation into the blockchain. And the amount is now stored in the public wallet, which where it is reserved for everyone to start mining from it. So let's go see how we can get some coins. Just switch to the live website. And wait my camera to start. Okay, here we go. The mining started automatically. Oubloom introduces an innovative, eco-friendly crypto mining method. You know, instead of using the usual energy-consuming classical mining like proof of work, it uses machine learning detection by TensorFlow library together with PoseNet. These are these lines that are here detecting my pose. To prove the user's non-activity. So unsigned user like I am right now, we create new coins in the public wallet. And this these coins are then reserved for signed users to transfer these coins from public wallet to their private ones. So this is the main difference between being signed or unsigned. Okay, now if I stop this session, you will see that I earned 0.33 Oublomos, and everything is stored in, was added to the public wallet. If I sign in, okay. You can also see that now I have other wallets beside the public one. So there is my private wallets. I can add new, I can delete one, I can send coins between the wallets. Everything is then recorded on the blockchain when you can follow all the transactions either through wallet activity or by tracing transaction ID. You also have a about page when you can read about various stuff around about the project. You can here see some technical background about it. And also, of course, there is a market page. This is a crucial and also central point beside the mining platform. And this is where you will be able to spend your coins. So it is basically an exchange of items and services. It's right now it's the only part of the platform that is not built yet, because this Corona crisis got me daydreaming a bit too much, I guess. So, but it's coming in August 2020. Here I can show you a glimpse of it. So these are some items that will be available in the start, like some sort of a promo material, and also some services that will circulate around the market. Okay, maybe if you haven't heard about the term Oublomovism, maybe I can explain a bit where it comes from. So it comes from a novel Oublomo, a Russian classic by Ivan Goncharo from the 19th century, where the main character, Ilya Ilyich Oublomo, depicts probably the most laziest person in world literature ever. And soon after the release of the novel, Oublomovism became an adjective for sluggishness, first in Russia and later worldwide. It is a sort of Russian echo, a deviation of Western values at the time. So a notion of different behavior of an individual. It is, in a way, an example of possible existence. Is it a deviation or a vision? I leave that decision to you. So sign in and see you on Oubloom platform. Thank you.
Thank you, Sašo. We're arriving to our last presentation for today by Telekommunisten. Telekommunisten is a technology and art collective based in Berlin, operating since May 1st, 2006. They produce installations, texts, web-based applications, and a variety of participative formats, always with a strong engagement to disclose the material social contradictions reproducing our techno-industrial condition. Two members of Telekommunisten are with us today to present their latest project, a Marxist-inspired cryptocurrency. Among many other things, as part of the Telekommunisten manifesto, Dmitry Kleiner has published a peer production license, a commons-friendly license he describes as copy far left, and he also proposed venture communism, a mode of worker-controlled production modeled on peer networks and the commons. Baruch Gottlieb, the other members present with us today, recently published Digital Materialism, an essay in which he demonstrates that the radical materiality of all digital data stems from other human beings, be they in action laboring in the present day or as recorded labor in the forms of commodities or machines, reasserting this way the labor theory of value in the digital economy. Baruch, Dmitry, tell us more.
Well, thank you, Aude, for inviting us to MoneyLab 8. We're very happy to be here at this panel and to present our new piece of software art called the Hackett. Hackett is code as art or art as code. We, in the series of works that we've presented so far, such as R15N, which we presented at Aksioma, did we? And
yes,
and Thimble, for example, where we kind of perform situations out of a political economy of networks that we insert the software into the context of the art presentation institution, and then thereby generate behaviors which by people who are like using the software. And hopefully that leads to some better understanding of how the political economy of network computation really is reproduced on a daily basis. So the Hackett is intended to insert, it has a very specific purpose. It's intended to insert or reassert the importance and the relevance of what is called today the labor theory of value into the cryptocurrency space. So a lot of discussion in cryptocurrency kind of it gets hyperbolic in terms of how what the possibilities are for this new technological affordance. And we want to, with the Hackett, we want to ground that somewhat in materialist concerns, because so we are taking as the basis of all economic value those insights of the classical economists Adam Smith and Ricardo 250 years ago, which established that all value comes from labor, human labor, and now extended in the computer age to labor, as Marx also noted, labor inscribed or recorded or concretized in machines and then performed through automation, automated through electricity or whatever kind of power. So that's what Marx referred to as dead labor. So in essence, we want to say that the value that's in any cryptocurrency affordance, commodity exchange, decentralized commodity exchange affordance, is still based on human labor, built like that has to be reproduced inside the system, or that is being performed through the system through the machines in the system. So computer work, proof of work is work. And what we're trying to do with the Hackett is to strip away some distortions in that, which may lead people to have the wrong assumptions, or or try to see what the cryptocurrency systems can actually offer for the future of exchange, perhaps, you know, in the realm of federated cooperatives, for example. Why? So Dimitri wrote an article a while ago about the face value of Bitcoin, in which he made this very dramatic claim that the true value of Bitcoin is zero, because it is the value of Bitcoin, or the price of Bitcoin is decoupled from the amount of labor that goes into producing Bitcoins. So our project is intended to strip away some of those design properties of Bitcoin, which decouple the allocation of Bitcoin, so the production of Bitcoin, the number of Bitcoin that are produced, from the amount of work that goes into it, the hashing power that goes into producing the token. So our token, the Hackett, we have various ways to do it, but basically, for example, with Bitcoin, so we have a Bitcoin version, we have an Ethereum version. We remove those aspects of Bitcoin which dissociate the production of the token from the amount of work that goes into producing the token. In other words, the amount of hashing that goes into it. So in the Hackett, the amount of Hackets produced, and Hackett is, by the way, Esperanto for hash. So the amount of Hackets that are produced is directly a direct ratio of the amount of hashes that are required, computer hashes, so actual computer operations, hardware operations that are necessary to produce and verify and whatever the Hackett, the token. So that's it in a nutshell. What else do we have to say about that?
Well, we could talk about the value thing in a little more detail.
Yeah.
I mean, Bitcoin has zero value in the financial models, right? So according to finance theory, Bitcoin has zero value, and that's because finance theory holds a security to be based on what it's a claim on. And Bitcoin is not a claim on anything. You can't pay your taxes with it. It doesn't bear interest. It's not a claim to the profits of a corporation. It's not securitized with anything. So as a financial instrument, its value is zero. What's more surprising, though, is in Austrian economics, which largely informs the Bitcoin community, its value is also zero, because in Austrian economy, they talk about economics. They talk about sound money, which means that the money is collateralized in something useful, like a gold coin. If nobody wants it as a coin, you can still melt it down and make a tooth out of it or something. So it has a collateralized value. So just like with the finance theory, it has no securitized value. In Austrian theory, it has no collateralized value. So it's also in zero. Coincidentally, the only school of economics in which it doesn't have a zero value is the Marxian school and the classical school of economics that Baruch mentioned, because in the classical school of economics, the value comes from the amount of labor embedded in it, right? So there, all of a sudden, we have a non-zero value. So finance theory tells us it's worthless. Austrian theory tells us it's worthless. Marginalist, neoclassical theory tells us it's worthless. But Marxian and classical theory says, well, certainly it took work to produce all the computers that are doing all the computation, and if there's a demand for it, so if this work is somehow useful because it's verifying transactions, it's clearing payments, then it has a clear value, and the value is the computational power that was used to verify the block, right? So Marxian theory does give us a value that's non-zero, unlike neoclassical or finance theory. So this is what I discussed in the paper that Baruch mentioned, and this is what we've shown in the Hackett artwork, and the code part of it is actually very, very dramatically simple, because actually the Bitcoin algorithm and many other algorithms already have something that gives you an approximation of the amount of computing power that is being used, and it's called the difficulty. Right, the difficulty controls the length of the target hash that is needed to be solved by a potential miner in order to claim the block. And as more miners enter the pool, so as the capacity goes up, as the computing capacity goes up, as more miners enter the pool, the difficulty gets bigger, right? So that it gets harder and harder to solve the puzzle. The more people are trying to solve the puzzle, right? So the amount of bitcoins that are created when a block is mined is called the block subsidy, or often the block reward, which also includes transaction fees. But the block reward in our model is simply a function of the difficulty. So it's a ludicrously simple algorithm. It's only a couple of lines of code. The existing Bitcoin algorithm, however, is far from simple. They have some very bizarre algorithm, which they've picked a random number of 21 million, and they have it. So it's not based on any kind of monetary theory, and it's completely detached from the actual cost of production, right? So that's why Bitcoin has a completely random value, because, unlike finance theory and neoclassical theory, which says it has zero value, we agree with Marx. There's clearly value here because there's work being done to produce it and somebody wants it. That's all that's required for Marx. Marx doesn't require anything else. There's work that's being done to produce it and somebody wants it, right? There's demand for it. That's enough. And so we understand the amount of work that's being done from it because it's the computing power of the resources used to produce the block. And so all we want to do is make sure that the amount of Bitcoin produced relates to the difficulty. And this is the opposite of what the actual Bitcoin algorithm does, which has this random number of 21 million that's halved with a reward that's halved over time. And this number is completely random. It comes from nothing, right? It's the opposite of economic theory, and certainly the opposite of sound economic theory of the Austrian style, because it's literally a random number. That has nothing to do with the cost of production. So what you get is you get a kind of like a short circuit, a kind of a feedback loop. If you know what a positive feedback loop is, a positive feedback loop is when the increase of something makes it increase faster. So it accelerates the increase, right? And so if you think about what the Bitcoin reward algorithm does, when more miners enter the pool, right? If the value of the coins comes from the amount of mining power, that's what Marx tells us, and the only one that has any kind of number that we can use, then the value of the coins is based on that mining power. But if the amount of the coins is fixed, then as more mining power enters the pool, the value of each coin goes up because no extra coins are produced, right? So if you compare it to a regular commodity like apples, if a lot more apple growers, rather, and apples aren't mined, if a lot more apple growers enter the apple market, then the number of apples goes up, along with the amount of labor that goes into making all these apples. So the price of apples stays relatively stable, or might even come down if it starts to go beyond demand. Whereas with Bitcoin, the value goes up because there's no extra Bitcoins being produced in order to capture the value of the extra miners, right? And then the speculative market sees it going up and goes, oh my God, I better invest on this. And it becomes an investment. People invest in it not because they want it to make transactions as money. They want it as a security because they see its value going up. This in turn attracts more miners, and it causes a positive feedback loop that causes the value to jump really high. And then you have the speculators start to panic a little bit. They start to sell, right? The price goes down, mining leaves the pool, and you have the positive feedback loop operating in reverse, and you have spectacular crashes, right? And so that is why the Bitcoin algorithm goes spectacularly up and down, because the reward algorithm has completely detached the number of Bitcoins produced from the mining capacity that was used to produce them from where their value comes, right? So our proposal is that if you get rid of that insane block reward algorithm that's totally made of nothing, and simply derive the block reward directly from the difficulty, which represents the amount of mining being done, then it will work more like apples. It will work like a regular commodity or like gold, right? Whereas if more miners enter, right, then more there'll be more supply, which will bring the price down. Miners will leave, which will bring the price up. Miners will join, and so the market will regulate the price of the digital currency the same way that it regulates every other commodity on the market, whether it's gold or whether it's apples. Does that all make sense?
Yeah, and so in that sense, the hacket can eventually be used as a money because it will respond to demand in the market for the hacket and for the services of having this cryptocurrency, this distributed affordance of material exchange. And so yes, so we bring it back to the material conditions of the generation of the hacket, which are the computers, also the electricity grid, and all the labor that's involved, and that's the value that will, in a very simple way, correspond to the amount of hackets that are in the system. So yes, and another, so what we did with, for example, we just kind of forked Bitcoin. We took the whole Bitcoin code base, and we just removed those elements which arbitrarily distort the issuance of Bitcoin from as Dima described, the amount of computational power that's in the system, or how much hashing power is in the system. When that increases, then a greater ratio of hackets will be produced. And in that sense, the value it's imagined will be much more stable, and it will be a much better device, like in French they use devise, but like a currency to use for everyday transactions, because it's not as volatile as Bitcoin.
That's right. But of course, we're just releasing Aude's code, so you can't actually run our version of the Bitcoin. You can just actually see the code as text.
Yeah.
So it's we're not a fintech startup, so we're not intending to operate a currency network. We're doing this artistically to kind of illustrate how this works, and to tie it to material conditions and sources of labor, and to offer a way to fix the problems that everybody knows are there with the volatility of the price.
Yeah, so we do publish the patch, so anybody can kind of implement it and start up their own Hackett Bitcoin. There's also a project for a Hackett Ethereum.
Yeah.
So which it just does exactly the same thing, just forks Ethereum and removes those arbitrary distortions. And another thing we did is very speculatively, one nice thing about Bitcoin, of course, is that the transaction ledger is public. So we can look at the history of the hash rate from the beginning of Bitcoin and see how that corresponded to the trading value, to various indexes of how the value of Bitcoin was calculated. And then we can speculatively layer, that's what we showed where Aude was, the exhibition that Aude curated in Mulhouse, what the Hackett would have produced.
Exactly.
With that variation of hashing power.
And I mean that needs to be interpreted, because what that shows is that the Hackett line looks exactly like the Bitcoin line, just with a lot less deviation and a little bit delayed, right? And that's simply showing the market adjusting and having less speculative extension based on the positive and negative feedback loops that the speculation brings to Bitcoin.
Yeah.
So
I mean, of course, it's completely speculative.
It's a more compressed line with approximately the same shape and a little bit delayed.
Yeah, it has some variations, but of course, it's completely speculative because people using a Hackett system will have completely different behaviors. So
That's right.
We're just trying to make a point that trying to prove that our rational cryptocurrency, we call it the rational cryptocurrency because the token issuance, the Hackett issuance, is always a ratio of the hashing power in the system. So it's a ratio, not rational in terms of like thinking rational, but ratio rational.
We call it rational because the central thesis is that there should be a fixed ratio between the amount of work and the amount of coin. So in the proof of work algorithm, the amount of work and the amount of coin should have a fixed ratio, so that as difficulty goes up, blocks that require more work should also produce more coin, and conversely, blocks that require less work should also produce less coin, right? So there should be a fixed ratio between the amount of work and the amount of coin. Again, just like there is in all other commodities, just like there is in the production of apples or gold, there's a fixed ratio between the amount of work extended in the production and the amount of commodity produced.
So in the speculative charts, we plot what the hack rate would have been, but of course that's based on what happened with Bitcoin historically since 2009.
Thank you, Baruch, Dimitri. So much exciting content in this session. Thank you all for that. So now I guess it's discussion time here, and we'll start by having a little debate together, and in approximately 20 to, I guess, 25 minutes, we'll take questions from the chat, your questions. So once again, do not hesitate to join the chat, which is on the right side of your screen if you watch from aksioma.org/monelab8 or directly on tlk.io/monelab8. Martin, César, Paul, Sašo, Baruch, Dimitri, of course, you're more than welcome to directly interact with each other and ask questions to the other panelists here. Do you maybe already have questions? Or if not, of course, we can wait for that. And I can start with a question I have by my side. So all of the art projects that have been presented today imply to some degree an interaction with what we call the real world, or maybe let's say an interaction with the outside of the art world. Max and Paul, Sašo, Baruch and Dmitri, your projects are designed with some efficiency in mind. Baruch and Dmitri, you already just answered this in your presentation, but Paul, Sašo, could you maybe tell me more about your position as artist towards this question, or maybe in a more speculative approach, what if these projects were to meet wide adoption? What would make them become fully usable? And yeah, would that be a friendly scenario for you?
Paul?
You can start.
I can start. Okay,
Yes.
maybe. Well, yes, this, I mean, first of all, I don't think there is a thing as an outside art world, you know. Art always kind of reflects the reality. Yeah? And yes, I mean, wide adoption of this would definitely be a good scenario, I think, for all of us. I mean, at least the one that like being, that like leisure time, they like, especially now in the last months, we have seen that also this kind of inactivity can have a certain value, you know, because we are forced into a situation that suddenly changed the whole game. You know, if before only labor had some kind of value, material plus labor, now suddenly being at home, being inactive, being idle, suddenly became something that we all had to deal with in some way. You know. And I think that the future is also implicating such, not just future, but also our present today with automation, and AI is already implicating that we need to start thinking about alternative ways of valuing things. And so, yes, it's, yeah, I mean, it's a speculative project inside art world. I mean, it doesn't have a big impact at the moment, but yeah, who knows? You know, you never know. For example, even I don't know. You know that religion, Muslim religion, started as an obscure sect in somewhere in Middle East, also, or Christianity is the same thing. You know, no one would predict the global impact of these religions if it would, I don't know, at zero BC. You know? So world is full of surprises. So yeah, you never know what's behind the corner.
I mean, I think for me, it's really also a question like, what does like adaption mean, and to what point does it actually make sense to have like a widespread adaption of like systems, like especially if you think of them as kind of like community systems or systems which can like work in like more like smaller or local contexts, which I think a lot of the experiments or the stuff we did with Nascent tries to do. And I think also that the kind of, or for me, there's a certain kind of division between like the art world and the real world. And the art world is like, has pretty much little to do, or has like pretty much really little overlapping points with what people actually experience in their daily life. So I think one of the points we wanted to make also with the first project is a little bit going into this direction of seeing how to open up these institutions and seeing how what happens when you like make resources which these institutions have actually democratically available to people which would normally have not kind of access to them.
And maybe you can just like say a few words about what happened. Like, did people interact with Ishtagate? Or I mean, I know I think the project is over now. Did you see?
I mean, yeah, funnily enough, people interacted with it, but what didn't work in the end was the communication between various kind of like involved institutions, which were kind of had problems to like verify like certain kind of like identities which were given in the system itself. So it kind of like failed a little bit due to the kind of work effort the institution had actually to put into it, which didn't happen. So yeah, that's also a really interesting learning.
Yeah, I just meant so it didn't have to fail. Like it could have gone on, right?
Yeah. I mean, technically yes, but obviously, like if you work with institutions and trying to build these things, there always needs to be more people, or like kind of it needs like more people to build this. And if like the institution is not like I think we get the point.
Yeah. Okay. So the model was good at least. All right. I guess my second question could be for Martin and César. Since a large part of your diagram relates to the knowledge economy, opposing cognitive capitalism to peer-to-peer culture, I was wondering if you had a comment on the fact that from now on, Sci-Hub, the most relied on website for accessing paywalled scientific papers for free, can only rely on Bitcoin for donations. So I guess this, of course, takes us back to notably the 2010 banking blockade on WikiLeaks, which led the organization to only rely on cryptocurrencies for direct donations too. So I guess I'm slightly speculating here, and I want to ask you if you believe this kind of situation would tend to be more and more frequent, extending possibly to more and more independent media. And if so, maybe if this could be a path towards a massification of use of cryptocurrencies for the general public in this kind of situation.
Well, we think that cryptocurrencies have always a very close relationship with marketplaces that are not so legal, like Silk Road. It also appears in the diagram. It was like the first marketplace that gives like a push and start like moving and using Bitcoin. So that relationship between cryptocurrencies and these kind of marketplaces, or marketplaces that are try to be censored, like as you said, like Sci-Hub, or like the WikiLeaks. Also, that was like also another big example. This relationship, and that is what we try to show in our work, is like this sort of relationships that, and is
So basically, the Silk Road and the donation of WikiLeaks was the two facts make Bitcoin more known in certain point. No, so if we come back to the generation of value, when you develop a new cryptocurrency, which right now there is like around 5,000 cryptocurrencies, one of the most important variables is the creation of value. So in this creation of value, creating a community and make the community believe in your cryptocurrency is what is going to, in certain point, make your cryptocurrency useful, no? And that is making the cryptocurrency valuable, no? That we can link this idea with the idea that the previous presentation makes, no? So this face value, no? Behind the ideologically, blockchain, well, something in common of this whole presentation is that behind this artwork there is a really big research, no? So creating an artwork talking about blockchain, Bitcoin, have like a lot of research behind, no? So ideologically, the Bitcoin was created like a decentralized system for capital transactions, no? And every computer could take part in this network of miners mining the cryptocurrencies. So at the beginning, it was decentralized. It was a system that was conceived for being out to the bank system because there is not need for third parties, and this network of computer makes the system safe, no? But at the end, this competition increased so much that nowadays Bitcoin miners are farms, most of them in China, mining and producing a lot of waste and a lot of electricity consumption, no? The electricity consumption is as high as a country as Austria, for example, no? That you can link also with the difficulty that you were talking, no? We can talk a little bit about that, no? So if the value of Bitcoin decrease, the difficulty decrease as well. So the electricity consumption decrease as well. So in certain point, it's a self-regulated system. But
Well,
sorry.
yeah, there is like a relationship between these variables, but yeah, it's like we could be open to the discussion if it's really is like regulating by itself, because also there's like all this speculation thing. But it's true that there's like a relationship between the energy, the difficulty of the blockchain, definitely, and also like the price of energy. And we could also discuss what happened in 2018 when the price went down and then a lot of mines shut down. Yeah.
As an artist, like it's the question that you were talking also. For us, for example, it's much more interesting, not really going technically to all these aspects, but arising questions, no? For example, we are talking about a proof of work, no? But we are talking also, Sašo, talking a proof of laziness, no? How many different proof of something as an artist can we develop, no? So a proof of dancing, of proof of randomness, or another kind of proof that at the same time is opening questions, no? And also, if something is interesting in blockchain, it's like.
And also, when you talk about different proof of work or you also have to, and I think it was mentioned before about what is that the relationship of your artwork that wants to have like with the real concepts of blockchain. I mean, you can do like if you want really that it helps to verify or it really wants to work, it's like, because it's very easy to do like a blockchain that is based in proof of whatever, but that proof, it has like any relationship with the blockchain, it doesn't help or work with it in any way. That is very interesting from the artistic point of view because open us like a different perspectives. But yeah, we could talk also about the connection between the art world, the real blockchain is, if it's like feasible. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it's like we are always moving like in that space.
Also, Terra Zero is super interesting, no? Because it's opening this idea of post-human, no? And it's giving the decision to a forest, no? At a certain point, no? So it's also from the point of view of the artist, it's not really interesting to create a a system which is working properly, but opening questions, no, and to see the possibilities, no, of the this new technological advance, no, and pros and cons, and opening debates.
Baruch,
Well, I think
I see you.
yeah,
Maybe.
yeah.
You seem to disagree on some points, I guess. Do you want to maybe make your point? Or?
Well, yeah, sure. I mean, we have to distinguish as artists what we mean by value. You know, this word is very ambiguous, right? If we're talking about emotional value, personal value, cultural value, you know, or we're really talking about economic value. If we're in the cryptocurrency space, the main thing that holds the whole cryptocurrency space together is economic value. It's not cultural value. All of this stuff can be built on it, no problem. You know, emotional value, cultural value, all this stuff. Okay, it's wonderful, you know. You have a fantasy space and you can imagine what you want, you know, as long as your regular economy is still working and feeding you, your supermarket's working, you know, the truck drivers are delivering the food, and everything else is, the electricity is working, the water is working, everything's working under the old economy, no problem. You know, but when you're talking in the cryptocurrency space, it's the whole thing that holds it together is economic value. And economic value is not a mysterious thing. And for us, you know, as communists and as artists, we are interested in the radically opening up the realm of possibility of people's creativity, people's imaginations on a radically massive scale. And this requires, you know, providing an affordance and realistically producing plans and tools whereby, you know, should there be an opportunity, or now even prefiguratively, value can be exchanged in a way that that somehow can, value can be exchanged, and that's part of the dream of Bitcoin from the anarcho-capitalists or the anarcho-libertarians who were advocating Bitcoin, that can be outside of the national fiat currency systems, you know, all the controlled systems of exchange. So let's say, so if we wanted to, for example, and this is what the Hackett is designed to do, it's designed to scale at the size of Bitcoin. Now, that means that and Bitcoin scales, and that's one thing that you pointed to. You know, of course, it's very wasteful, and the difficulty is the security. The difficulty, the reason that it uses so many computer resources is to ensure the security of the system. And Bitcoin is incredibly robust. It's the only robust system that has not been hacked and is still has not been forked like Ethereum. So you can dream all you want about Ethereum and proof of stake and everything else that they're trying to build on it, whatever you want. But the only thing that has been developed so far that can ensure secure transactions and non-falsifiable transactions and no double spend globally forever is Bitcoin. That's it. And it uses a lot of resources. Sorry, you know, if you want that affordance, you have to take the pollution. And for the, yeah.
Is this like a Bitcoin maximalist approach you're just presenting?
I think we don't want the Bitcoin at all, because Bitcoin is the real value of Bitcoin. The real economic value is zero. Some of you have put together some beautiful projects. I love the spirit behind them, but you know the thing is that whatever unit of exchange you're using, if it's Bitcoin, dollar, euro, whatever, ounce of gold, it needs to have equivalent in the economy. You know, it cannot just be faith in, you know, your fellow person. Okay, you can do it with your community, like your local community, but this is like, it doesn't scale.
if you want to have something that's going to scale globally, you need it to be grounded. It has to be redeemed, and Bitcoin cannot be redeemed except for through fiat currency, right? I think that the problem with Bitcoin, of course, is that it has these design features which were installed at the beginning, which made sense to the designers, but they decouple and they disassociate the amount of computer work that goes into verifying the system from the amount of Bitcoins that are published or generated in the system. And this produces a dissociation, a distortion, whereby you have, like this, as Dimitri explained in the presentation, you have maybe sometimes where there's a lot more work going on in the system, but the same amount of Bitcoins are being produced. If you have this distortion, then you have the realm of all kinds of speculation taking place, and that's what happens with Bitcoin. So Bitcoin just flies all over the place because it's not rational. It doesn't have the fixed ratio between the amount of computer work necessary to secure the system, to make sure it works for everybody, to make sure that everything is reliable, all transactions are reliable, and the amount of coins that are produced into the system. And then again, Bitcoin has this ridiculous 21 million coin limit for no reason. I mean, why should there be a limit of coins when the system will be still running? Okay, there's transaction fees and all the kind of stuff that they're doing. So Hackett is just a modest proposal to strip away all those strange design features and make it a rational currency that can be used forever by everybody.
Well, as long as the world still has, like, you can still mine. I mean, because your proposal also is based in as long as you're like, I think it would be even faster the growth of the expense of the mining power in your proposal, if I understood correctly.
It depends how much how it's being used, but of course, I mean, this does not solve any of the problems of combating capitalism or anything like that. I mean, if you really want to make Hackett not so necessary, or make it make it less necessary, then you need some change of how we reproduce society in a non-capitalist way.
But isn't it that also the fiat money, it doesn't anymore have this work behind, since the 70s?
Yeah,
so
fiat money is no problem.
But we are also talking about more than proof of work with fiat money, but more think of proof of authority or some sort. Is it the same with Bitcoin, that the future of it is not computing power, but maybe some sort of authority? This is what also the banks are now, or governments are adopting in a way. I don't know.
Well, it shouldn't be, because the whole magic about the whole special feature about Bitcoin is it has a distributed authority, right? That is the revolutionary potential of Bitcoin. That's why we can use it for WikiLeaks and we can use it for Sci-Hub, because it's outside of all authority. So like whatever authority wants to say, okay, no, you cannot use our money anymore, well, you can still use Bitcoin. And of course, there's still the problem of translating it out and using it for your bills and whatever you're going to use Bitcoin for. But still, that's the special feature of these distributed cryptocurrencies. And they do work for that. Now, fiat currency, like the one that China is supposed to be producing now, they're supposed to be producing some kind of crypto currency on a national level. That's going to be a fiat crypto. And a fiat crypto is just authorized by the national authority. So yes, they use whatever algorithm they have, and it can be a much more efficient algorithm because it doesn't need to have this distributed authority. This distributed authority is very expensive in terms of computational power. That's what's expensive. That's what's using all the energy.
I mean, maybe just like to add on this, like I think the value of Bitcoin or the value of these systems is really that you can find consensus in a system where no one trusts each other. And these systems don't exist actually that much in the kind of society we live in. So the real question is kind of like, where does the system are currently used and where they should be used? And as we see, this is also why Bitcoin arises basically from black and gray markets, because there was the opportunity to go basically not get recognized by authorities. And I mean, this is kind of the core values of Bitcoin are essentially like not in kind of a state context. So like Bitcoin is always, if you like bring it down to like the philosophy which is behind, basically against the state.
Well, yeah, I mean, again, we have to dissociate another couple of terms, value and price, right? Value and price are not the same thing. So sure, I mean, what you have with Bitcoin is a commodity. It's a computational commodity which you buy or you generate through your, your mining rig, and which you can use to exchange to buy guns or drugs or whatever across normal national jurisdictions or whatever like that. And yeah, I mean, that does produce new phenomena, new possibilities of exchange for normal people. Actually, in a way, it kind of democratizes the black market, because it used to be that you had to be part of the mafia or something, and now you can do it in your home. So, that means that the black market's coming home. I mean, okay, this any new technical affordance breaks previous taboos or previous restrictions. That naturally happens. But the price and the value, yeah. No, I mean, the point of the hacket is to try to make the price stable, so that it's not like becomes a speculative instrument. It doesn't become this ridiculous gambling thing. And so that people can actually use it to build their cooperatives or to build stuff that has real value, not just use it for in the black market.
I just don't like the ecological point of view of this proof of work. But does anyone know what's going on with these masternode ideas? They were for a while, they were kind of hot topic. Supernodes, masternodes idea. So it is in a way upgrade of proof of stake, but it was a promise of
proof
being
of stake
more
is just a bank. Proof of stake is just a bank. It just means that there's other intermediate authorities. Unfortunately, there is no. I mean, I don't like it any more than you do. No, it's less centralized. I mean, it's distributed. I mean, because you have the masternodes. Who are the masternodes? Who are they?
Yeah. The one
every proof of stake system has.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you have to trust them. There's no like distributed agency. There's no distributed authority.
But okay, even if I go to the bank, I trust them. They will actually give me money. I mean, so there's a certain amount of trust involved.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, banks have been established. They're established by charter. They're legally established, and maybe that will be the future to some extent. The certain proof of stake banks will emerge. Hopefully they'll stay around long enough for you to get your money.
Yeah, and we will open up our own.
Yeah, but in some way,
small proof of stakes.
Yeah, you can start your own bank. Yeah, that's another thing. We can all do that now. Yeah, that's definitely the case.
I mean, that's basically what a lot of
bank.
Yeah. No, that to start like your own bank, you need like a lot of resources, because as far as I know, it's like the proof of stake, you need to have like a huge amount of token, of whatever you're like dealing. And it's true that it's like emerging like the structures that we already know. So it's like, why did we have like all this stress with blockchain if we end up with a wonderful, with exactly the same thing as we had before? So it's like, yeah. I think I agree with you in this topic.
Blockchain is only running in the last 11 years, no? So we are sure that there is an improvement coming, no? We analyze ideologically, technologically, economically, and well, it's a really new technology, and we are sure that all these problems, ecological problems, can be solved with a very nice idea, no? So at the end, Bitcoin came for another ideas of another cryptographers previously, So this is why I like your proposal, because it's a proposal which is increasing, It's increasing in this direction,
Yeah. And the last is like, for example, I don't know if there's like space for a very good idea that is going to solve the problem. For example, from the problem of energy consumption, I look the design and I don't think, all the plan Bs is like these super nodes or like proof of stake, but, it's, they're like these sort of ideas, like so that they work one with the other, that I don't see like, when they're saying like, yeah, no, Bitcoin is terrible, but blockchain in the future is going to be wonderful and it's going to solve all the problems without, no energy consumption and so on. I know a little bit about the stuff, and we have like this paper critical mining. So we did like I wrote few miners. I know stuff about that, and I don't see what is that space for the wonderful idea. No, I don't see it. I don't know what do you think.
That's the genius of Bitcoin,
Yeah.
It uses energy. You have to compete
Yeah.
against each other, and no matter how computers technology is innovated, it's going to be a kind of arms race all the way, and that requires the whole instantiation and reproduction of the whole electronics production chain. All of that labor and all of the electricity generation, that is the value of inside the Bitcoin. And that's because that is what ensures the security of the system. So what is the value of a secure transaction system for whatever your commercial purposes or whatever your exchange purposes? What is the value of the system itself?
So guys, I see, I'm sorry. I mean, time is really running on our side. I wanted to ask one more question before we go to the questions from the audience. So I've been asking you about wide adoption of your projects. I was trying to have you talk about mass adoption of cryptocurrencies, which quickly delved in the technical issues, but there's a notion that Max mentioned at the start of Nascent's presentation that sounds very important also in this context, and that resonates widely in the area of blockchain-based organization, especially DAOs. It's the notion of exit, and I'd like to hear you all about this actually, if you have, of course, specifics, thoughts, and even you, maybe Paul, for more details with regards to your own research. Yeah, so.
I mean, yeah, maybe I think the idea of exit is like really kind of can be really like generalized in a way as kind of like you could say building like structures outside of like already existing institutional or kind of corporate or state frameworks. So, and I think this is kind of a wildly adapting kind of like political strategy now, from like all kinds of like from all kinds of the spectrum of political groups or whatever you want to call this, to kind of build infrastructure which is basically not reliant on like certain things like corporations, like the state, like other things. So I think exit itself is kind of like a good strategy to facilitate like certain kind of communities in like small spaces and certain kind of politics in like certain spaces where they like can be, yeah, where certain like stuff can be rebuilt outside of a institutional frame. And yeah, I think this is something which is, I think, inherent in Bitcoin in a way. I mean, it's also a big kind of like, or it might be also like quoted heavily in kind of like libertarian kind of like circles, but I think it's something which is kind of inherently in Bitcoin and like these kind of like exotic financial systems. And I think as a strategy, as an artistic strategy also in relation to the art market and to structures which exist in the art market today, it's really worth looking into this.
What do you mean by regarding the art market? What is the art market? They're feudal. They're feudalists.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I totally agree with you.
So
that's that's what I'm saying.
You
like,
mean you want to create something outside the art market to sustain art practice?
I mean, basically, that's kind of the question, right? How do we do art, and how can we like sustain art practice without having to rely on, I don't know, like weird funding, kind of like galleries, which basically just sell wall works, etc., etc. So there comes really like the question I mean, this relates also obviously to like a personal practice of like being an artist, right? And how can this like practice change and become more something like it's kind of also like community building and kind of like a practice of kind of finding spaces which can be like in which like certain notions of like art or what can art be can be rebuilt.
Yeah, sure. I mean, then you want a stable cryptocurrency, not one of these speculative instruments like Bitcoin. You want the Hackett, which can have a reliable value based on proof of labor. And then everything is, you can build on it, and that's one of the visions behind the Hackett, that, like the SIC in Catalonia, that Enric Durand was working with, Faircoin. And Faircoin they had all this struggle with how to, using Litecoin and this kind of other algorithm, and then the proof of stake, they wanted to do it, and it's a big problem. But all those associated cooperatives, and there's cooperatives all around the world. I mean, producing an alternative, an exit, from capitalism, capitalist production, arts cooperatives, design cooperatives, and productive cooperatives, and they can exchange using cryptocurrency. That is the vision, right? But they need a stable instrument.
I mean, to a certain. Oh, yeah. Sorry. Someone else wanted something to say, or should I?
No, I guess you can go.
Okay. Yeah. No, I tend to agree. Yeah. I think also the question, it's a general question, if like to what extent like currencies or like cryptocurrencies are needed in the spaces, and to what extent also other like forms of kind of value transfers can like appear there. And but I mean, there is like a certain like notion, and I think this goes a little bit into like what Max and me presented in the end of the presentation, the notion of like how timekeeping is working and how consensus systems are working in these systems, and how various kind of like consensus systems could be like applied for various kind of like systems. So I think that the idea of having like a universal consensus system is like pretty flawed.
Yeah, thanks. I guess I'm sorry, but I mean, it's super interesting, but I guess it's really time for us to open to the questions to the audience. And for this, we'll join Nika, who's live from Kinoshitska in Ljubljana. Hi, Nika.
Hello. Okay, so the first question is from Jay Seol, and it's a question about Hackett. I was wondering how the collective negotiates the creation of value through labor versus the creation of money, which traditionally takes place as a privilege of national sovereignty. Is there a distinction in the theoretical apparatus of the Hackett, or is there a value in collapsing that difference? That's the question.
The Hackett
Yeah, that was the question. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, the Hackett is, it doesn't produce, the only thing it produces is the token Hackett, which is the same thing as a token Bitcoin. It's just so the value of the Hackett is the work that goes into the Hackett. It's the work that's in the system, which is used to securitize, to make secure exchange of the token Hackett in the system. So all the hardware, all the work that goes into it is the value of the Hackett. There's no privilege or anything like that which is needed to generate the Hackett. It's generated by the software itself. Just like Bitcoin.
Okay, go to the second question from Abi. What new kind of value could be created besides work, as in Oubloom? How we evaluate in the dynamical system progress and knowledge to algorithms and mechanism. That's, I guess, a question for everyone. Maybe we could start with Sašo or.
I don't know if I understood the question correctly. So, what other values can also be? Is that was the question, right?
Yeah, what new kind of value could be created besides work, as in Oubloom, and then how we evaluate in dynamical system, progress and knowledge to algorithms and mechanism. Maybe somebody else can also answer.
Yeah.
Depends what you mean by value.
Yeah, I think that.
Well, we have all sorts of things. You can just have a look at Ethereum and what's built on it, and you can see that cats can have value. Anything can have value today. I think we just mentioned also today that basically money today is information, and anything can be practically attached to it. But then we come to the central question: what is the central value that gives everything? But what we need is basically an exchange of things, what was also I think about Hackett is it kind of becoming a next Ethereum? Because if there is a
what? Sorry, I didn't get it.
Is it becoming like a new Ethereum? Does it have this?
No.
No. Because Ethereum is a good example of what can be done on top of existing platform like.
Yeah, I mean Ethereum can function, but as we saw, Ethereum is not based on sound cryptography, so it was hacked and had to be forked. And sorry, but no, I mean Hackett is much more stable than Ethereum, much more solid than Ethereum.
Because this is maybe the answer to this question, what anything can be built on the.
Yeah, but I mean, okay, so all of these new world of, you want to put the notaries out of business, right? You don't want any more notaries. You want to get married on the blockchain. You want to buy your house on the blockchain. All this stuff. Yeah, it's okay, but you would just as well have a notary. I mean, I don't see the big deal. And anyway, I mean, a lot of this stuff is just micro extraction, right? It's just micro. It's just schemes to get to extract micro payments and things. Under capitalism, it's necessary, I agree, but I don't see in the end, I would not rely on the value of Ethereum, to base my home economy on it, or my business economy on the value of Ethereum. I could use Ethereum maybe to buy some services, some kind of notary type services to like register a patent or register a copyright or something like that. I could use it and I change my euros into Ethereum and I buy some blockchain service that stamps my patent forever on the blockchain. Okay, yeah, why not?
But there is already mechanisms. Sorry, there is already mechanisms running right now, running property without spending so much electricity.
Yeah.
You don't need to get wearing in blockchain, but you already have. You can do it just.
It's called a notary.
Yeah. Signature.
He doesn't use so
everybody
much.
trusts and everybody believes in it.
Yeah, notary only uses, a few, some muesli in the morning and some, hamburger at night, and it's not so much energy.
Okay, so now the last question of MoneyLab 8. It's from Abhishek N. And we somehow talked about it earlier, but let's just rephrase it again. Is it even possible to separate speculation from currency and value? So maybe let's go in this direction, and that's the last question.
Is it possible to
I
separate?
would say no. I would. You think so? And how would you?
No, I
how would
agree.
you-
I don't think it's possible to separate speculation. No. Why would it be?
No.
It's just the commodity.
Yeah, even with commodities, you can have like a speculation.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't think so.
But I mean, you can limit the benefits of it, you know. I mean, the point of a fiat currency is that you can speculate on the, you can say, oh, I can expect the euro to go down or up by comparison to the US dollar or to the yen or something, you know. You can speculate on it, you know, but the point is that the currency itself that you're working with, that you're running your business with, that you're running your home economics with, is relatively stable. It's not prone to speculation. It's not because the speculators are speculating on it that it's going up or down crazily, you know. And that's what happens with Bitcoin. Nobody can do that to US dollar. Only the US can do it.
Okay, let's not have these words as the final words, please.
Let's have some hopeful, something hopeful, right? Aude,
Hopeful
you must have
or yeah,
something
whatever.
hopeful to say.
I do, but I guess this panel is more about you today, so I don't know. Do you? We can also discuss the hack that happened this morning on these pools, but I mean, I don't think it's really interesting. So it's a funny note. It's not really, I guess, like with
But
all this.
Aude, what is your big excitement about cryptocurrency? Tell us what.
Do I have a big excitement?
Do you?
I think my biggest excitement is in the blockchain sphere, but not in the cryptocurrency sphere.
Okay.
So my excitement is around DAOs, for now,
Okay.
at least. Like voting systems, specifically.
Because?
Because the ones we have today are completely crushed. I mean, we see it every day. Even like, I'm not also going to talk about yesterday, which was election day in France. But yeah, I mean, we really need to improve voting systems and even rethink the proper concept of voting, I guess. So.
In Russia, they have really interesting new way of voting by raising their hands in front of the TV. So.
Okay, Oubloom based. Then you mine a currency for voting.
Yeah, you just raise your hand in front of the TV and you vote.
Okay, and you get national cryptocurrency backed. Okay. So no other positive thought, or any kind of conclusive
Well,
thought?
I think like the only positive thought is basically like that blockchain and all these spheres open us to think like very interesting topics and give us like different perspective and make us think about how the value is created. I think that is all that discourse what is like most positive for me. That's like the we've never had Bitcoins. We are always been working very critical against it. So it's like but it allows when you hear like new projects and new points of view, that is what really is like the note that let us interchange ideas, maybe like, but that is like what really excites me about it. It's like not any smart contract or a currency, it's more like what opens, like that is like the most positive thing I can say right now about blockchain.
Yeah, to me also the transparency of things, like why should I trust an institution like a bank or something, or to me, the traceability and transparency is really interesting and exciting element of all this.
But there is also a lot of. I know that we have to finish, but it's because lately we've been talking about that in our research, and it's like that clarity, and it's like that you don't have to trust anyone, that you don't have to trust any human. You just have to trust like the cryptographic process that are and beneath this process that are like shifting like all. It's like that also has like a very negative point of view. If you read the white papers of the whatever platform, is basically it's like, yeah, you don't have to trust anyone, you just have to trust yourself, no? Or it's like, and for me that is in some way very scary. Like, it's like, how is going to be the society when we between humans we don't trust us each other? It's like we are like adopting like this definition of blockchain that for me is one of the best one, that is like blockchain as a protocol of trust. I think it's something similar. It's like this guy Trapscott, I don't know. And how is going to be that society? Is like, I still want to trust someone like this guy. I trust him. I don't know. It's like it's like we don't need to like a smart contract. So it's like, yeah, it's like, and I won't say anything more.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then I guess, yeah, on these words, I'll thank you all for this great discussion. It could obviously last much, much longer. And thank you, thank you, Yanis, thank you, Marcela, Sonia, Nika, and everyone at Aksioma who made this model lab possible. It's been a real pleasure for me, I have to say, to be involved both in the Tactics and Practices conference series that I enjoy following every year, and in the Money Lab this time again, since this event and its published outcomes have always been very inspirational to me. So Yanis, the mic is yours to conclude this very last session. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Aude, for leading this session. And I would like to thank also all the participants, including those who gave their inputs via the web chat, for the valuable contribution to the debate. And with this panel, we conclude the 9th edition of the Tactics and Practice conference that Aksioma has been organizing every year since 2010 here at Kinoshishka in Ljubljana. And if you want to have a look at what we have done in the past edition, go check aksioma.org/tactics.practice. Thanks to Con's platform for contemporary investigative art and to the collaboration with the Institute of Network Cultures, this year we have realized the 8th edition of Money Lab, which consisted in 8 streaming events. Critical finance strategies 3 months into the corona crisis, beyond solutionism in the post-COVID-19 world, data sovereignty and proximity tracing, care, solidarity is disobedience, housing, hacking the crisis of home, tax havens, normalized grand theft, blockchain radicalizing the social imagination, and value extraction and the workforce of the Cryptocene. All the talks are available on the Money Lab 8 website and or on Aksioma's YouTube and Vimeo channels. Before greeting you all for the last time and ending this great experience, I would like to personally thank all the people who made possible the realization of this event. Marcelo Kretic, Sonia Gardina, Jana Vilkoksen, Nika Mahnic, Vuk Cosic, Inte Gröerlich, Gert Loving, Tomin Savic, Walter Udovicic, Matej Marinček, Anja Zver, Jan Marin, Jaka Železnikar, Federico Antonini and Alessio D'Allena of Supernest.info, and Domen Timowski. And last but not least, thanks to all the speakers, moderators, special guests, online chat contributors, but also to all the people who believe in the relevance and urgency to talk about these topics nowadays, and have encouraged us to do so despite the objective difficulties generated by the pandemic. Goodbye to everyone, and keep on following us if you feel like. Bye.